I think let's start, Mpumi. Mpumi. So, comrades, I suggest we start now. Yeah. So I think we're going to start now. First of all, we apologize for the delay. The conversation was meant to start at 6 o'clock, and we just delayed it by 10 minutes. Welcome everyone to a conversation that I think is very, very important to have, and we cannot exhaust this conversation. I think that throughout the years we've been having this conversation because we really haven't got to a point in which we can see essentially the fruits or the fruition of having such conversations. So it's important that we continuously remind ourselves of the importance of the land question and what it means for us as young people in this occupied land called occupied Tanzania or South Africa. Just laying out the rules, can I ask that everyone ensures their mic on mute throughout the conversation? And I'm gonna ask that all the panelists to actually be on video and to only unmute themselves when they're the ones that are speaking. We have a beautiful and very intelligent panelists, essentially, and all of them coming from different perspectives, as we know that we live in a democratic, so-called democratic country that essentially has different political parties, and I think that it's very important that when we have these conversations, all these voices just kind of like come together and we actually have a conversation on the land question and what it actually means for different political parties and affiliations. So what I'm going to do is to just kind of like briefly state their names and their topics, give out sort of like the program, how it's going to be run from now onwards. We have about an hour, 30 minutes. Each speaker has 10 minutes to give their piece. And then towards the end of the conversation, we will have Q&A coming from you guys, coming from everyone that just came in who's not necessarily in the panel. Thank you guys for coming in. And we are trying to have this conversation live on Facebook. I believe Mpumi is working on that. And of course, people can also catch it on Facebook while we have it, when we have that sorted. Just to begin by just giving like a brief kind of background on the conversation. So we're essentially having and exploring the land question from a youth perspective. Rethink Africa is hosting this conversation, and Rethink Africa is the one that actually have put together a report that speaks to the land question from a youth perspective. So the report approaches the land question from three interpretations, which is land as agriculture, land as mining, and land as accommodation and housing. Each of these are critical elements of the South African economy and the livelihoods of the South African people. So the research report obviously explores youth awareness and views on land-related policies from the local to the national level. It interrogates how youth people interact with major stakeholders such as mining companies and landowners. It also looks at how young people keep those charged with governance accountable. So we have panelists from different political party affiliation, but we also have panelists who have who will be giving us background and key findings on the report itself. So firstly, we will have Sobantu Mzwakali. Apologies if I'm saying that incorrectly, but yeah, Sobantu will give us a background on of the report itself. We will then move to having Dr. Sfeso, who will give us key findings of the report. We will then move to a VETS EFF student command representative, Sivuile, who will give us his piece on what accommodation is, on the movement called Accommodation is Land and Student Struggles. We will then have Pinky Langa, who will then update us on organizing and action and how has organizing been affected by COVID-19. Then Thembeni will come through and take us through accommodation struggles in Alexandra and how have people in Alex responded to challenges of COVID-19. Phethani from Basma will also discuss Madangari village, the struggles of farmers, especially youth in Limpopo, and also give us a brief on essentially how Basma comrades have tackled or thought through around this topic. And then we will have a Q&A after everyone has wrapped up. So let me just ask Sobantu to actually give us the background on the report itself. Sobantu?
Thank you, Funzani, and greetings to everyone who has managed to join us as we launch this project which explores the youth perspective on land reform. As the facilitator has alluded, yes, I'll be providing context, background, areas of focus, and research questions and methodologies employed on this research project. Just to give a context, I think we all know that the land question has actually creeped the South African political imagination in the last few years. Broadly speaking, the accelerated land reform is gaining prominence as one of the main policy vehicles to solve the South African defining problems of poverty and inequality. And after 26 years of democracy, South Africa remains highly unequal country with high levels of poverty and unemployment. And land reform policies have largely failed to reconfigure the inherited, highly dualistic and spatially divided agrarian structure. So the recent 18th Constitutional Amendment Bill presents an opportunity to make explicit the state's existing expropriation powers, and this could give a new impetus to land reform in South Africa. The high-level panel on assessment of key legislations, which was held by the former President in 2017, the Presidential Advisory Panel in 2019 on land reform and agriculture, have also identified the absence of appropriate laws to give effect to the right to equitable access to land in South Africa. So then, therefore, there are key questions in relation to who should benefit from South Africa's land reform, how beneficiaries should be prioritized and targeted, and how land should be identified and allocated. These questions remains unresolved. So in the process, land reform policy has shifted fairly from the proper focus actually to become more market based. So, and then in addition to this policy shifts from 1996, research has also revealed that there's a rise of lead capture in land reform. So as those recommendations have been made by some processes that I've mentioned, from the high-level panel, the Constitutional Amendment Bill, the Presidential Advisory Panel as well. And while this still continues, South Africa, and along with the rest of the continent, has a growing youth demographic that is becoming increasingly politically active, as it was seen through the Fees Must Fall protests. So with that background in mind, this research project by Rethink Africa attempted to outline the key set of challenges, opportunities, and possible policy interventions in relation to equitable access to land in South Africa, especially with the focus on youth. Thus, unpacking the land question from a youth perspective is very, very, very crucial. And then the report approaches the land question from three interpretations. I think also, as we know, as the key element of the South African land reform, that will be then land as agriculture, land as mining, land as accommodation and housing. So each of these are critical elements of South African livelihoods and the economy. So the research then this research report explores youth awareness and views on land-related policy from the local to the national. I think, as Funzani has already said, our facilitator, that it further interrogates how people, or actually how youth interact with the major stakeholders such as mining companies, agribusiness and landowners. And then this report put emphasis or place emphasis on how young people have and are organizing for the rights to improve their lives and livelihoods. So young people may organize within formal movements and organizations or through informal sections and spontaneous initiatives. The report also found that young people of many different persuasions have dreams and aspirations that the land reform can change their lives. And then Rethink Africa from late last year then embarked on a research project to unpack the land question from a youth perspective. And then the overall objective of the project was to understand the clear pathways through which radical land reform will benefit the South African youth in particular. And then to understand this, or to understand the land question or the land issue from the youth perspective, we had key areas of focus or areas that we looked for. And that will be Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and Gauteng. In terms of Limpopo, we were looking at it as a rural province, but then also as one was once known as our country's breadbasket and one of South Africa's most important agricultural region as a significant producer of livestock, fruit and vegetables. And then we've seen in reports that in the recent years that the young people have been participating in agricultural sector. However, when we go to the findings, then you realize that young farmers still struggle to get access to land for farming or electricity subsidization and sufficient water. So farming inputs, infrastructure, extensions, and research are also those things that are still lacking for the young farmers, especially in what we found in Limpopo. And then in Mpumalanga, we look at Mpumalanga as an area that creates jobs because of itself being a mineral resource hub. So then the youth and unemployment levels are quite high in the area, and then while there's a rich natural resources in their abundance, or actually in their surrounding. So with this regard, we might have seen, I think Comrade Pinky will elaborate on this, we might have seen the rise of the mining affected communities united in action, the Makua and others organizing these mining affected communities to actually become very active and vocal in their quest to participate in the economy. And then in Gauteng, we looked in Gauteng as a place where it's also been a place for job creation, but then also we look at land as a source of housing and shelter. And then, but much more importantly, which is also based on our history of dispossession, we're also looking at the land as issue of dignity. And then therefore, out of these these three areas, which is Gauteng, Mpumalanga, and Limpopo, we're looking on land as agriculture, land as mining, and also looking at land as housing and shelter. We have employed certain research questions and methodology, trying to come up to see what we can come out of this. I mean, there were very overarching research questions where we were trying to center, like, how do young people in communities in South Africa relate to the land reform issues? And then this was subdivided to, amongst others, these few questions. Some you see them once you read the report once made public, like, what is the current state of land reform and how it affects young people? What are youth attitudes towards land and land reform? And what is the youth's participation or involvement in the land reform? We're looking at preliminary, and then we're also looking at the action points of youth activism on land reform, because it's very, very important that youth organize and mobilize around these issues. And then, in terms of our methodology actually consisted of preliminary focus. It was just a preliminary desktop research to plan the scope of the research. And then we did like a total of of 6 focus group discussions within young people fulfilling their various roles. And then, as I said, in these areas, and then these young people, I mean, not only just to categorize them also politically, these are the young people who are ranging from the age of 18 to 35. And then on our focus group discussions, we had where participants were specifically drawn from locations and social groups that have been marginalized. This includes youth from the inner city, urban, peri-urban, and rural areas. And then the focus group key informants included leading academics, students, members of farming cooperatives, grassroots activists, civil society organization activists, political organization members, and small-scale farming entrepreneurs. And then the use of government reports such as departmental, national and provincial, and municipality annual reports were also perused also to try to look at the findings to see in terms of the integrated development plan, to see in terms of the social labor plans, what is being offered to the South African youth. And then also, we also use the national statistics on statistics of South Africa to look actually at the household surveys, such as the General Household Survey. And then we looked at the targeted case studies of young individuals to focus on their experiences. So we've done this with hoping that the findings, as Comrade Sfiso will look into it, is that these findings will bring forth a deeper focused understanding of how youth relate to radical land reform and find the key policy, advocacy, and influencing touchstones, mobilizing and planning for the radical land reform. Thank you, Facilitator.
Thank you so much, Sobantu, for that brief introduction. Very important. And one of the things that I'm gathering from what you just said is how comprehensive this report is and how it touches on different perspectives, which is very important because quite often than not, what we usually do with these kind of conversations is just like have it focus on just one area, right? So I think it's very important that we have such a comprehensive report that speaks on this very important question. So what I'm going to do is to ensure that I time everyone. This will help me and help all the speakers. So I will keep on just making signs to say, okay, you have 3 minutes or you have 2 minutes, just to ensure that we actually on track when it comes to time. So I'm just gonna give Sfiso an opportunity to talk. Sfiso, I think it's very important that we are clear on that. An opportunity to actually just give us key findings of the report. And Dr. Sfiso, you also have 10 minutes to do so.
A very good evening to you all, and thank you for joining us as we launch our research report, which was primarily driven by the aim of capturing the views of the youth and their perspective on the raging land reform debates. As my colleague Sobantu has laid the background, I will quickly present the findings according to 3 interpretations, whereby he stated that we approached land as mining, land as housing, and land as agriculture. So I will start with the key findings regarding land as mining, which is a complicated nexus of mineral rights, land rights, and community governance. So since 1994, mining policies have been designed to benefit all South Africans and to try and address the spatial inequality and the racialized income and wealth inequality, since mining is argued to be at the center of these inequalities. Even if policies have been designed to benefit all South Africans, but what we found at the ground is that mining has not benefited the communities, especially at Emalahleni, where we conducted this research. One of the key findings is that there is a rapid deterioration of roads because of heavy vehicles servicing the coal mines, housing backlog because of in this area. And also remnants of closed mine shafts are still visible in Emalahleni. There are also social ills brought by mining activities in this area, such that public health facilities are not coping with the rapid increase in population. And there are also increases in respiratory problems due to dust from the mining operations. And there is increase in waterborne illnesses due to water pollution. And there is increase in alcohol abuse and sex work as well. In Emalahleni, one of them being that they need open consultation and they need to be engaged. They need some kind of engagement with the mining companies. And they pointed out that the high polluters, in their view, needs to be fined. And they strongly emphasize that they need to be involved in decision making because the mining activities that happen in this area is not benefiting them. I will also present key findings with regards to land as housing. The housing backlog being one of the non-crises that is still a daunting task for the post-apartheid state. So clearly land reform is central to bigger projects of urban restructuring, particularly in a place like Gauteng, Johannesburg, whereby many people migrate in search of better economic opportunities. So even if there are policies that have been designed to provide low-cost housing for rentals, the target group being the unemployed and the low-income group, the delivery falls far short beyond the increasing demand. There is a lack of affordable housing, and there is concerns about the rise of private developers, which is market-driven, and as a result is not benefiting a majority of unemployed youth who reside in inner city Johannesburg and Braamfontein, which is mainly a student population area. And with regards to land as agriculture, I think we all know that South Africa still has a dual economy that is comprised of commercial farming, dominated by white farmers, and small-scale farming that is dominated by low production subsistence farmers. So land reform has been an opportunity for restructuring agricultural production. But what we found is that in Limpopo, restitution, which is the common policy governing land ownership, has presented challenges in the sense that trying to access land through this form of policy has been painfully slow. And they also pointed out that the role of chiefs and the municipality is not clear. So there is lack of support basically for small scale farmers, even if it is a source of livelihood for the majority of households in Limpopo. And as a result, youth continue to bear the burden of unemployment because small scale farming has got limited capacity to generate financial reward. But the youth voiced their aspirations, noting that capital support is one of the most needed to make productive use of the land. And they also noted that they need access to more land. And they emphasized that small-scale farming needs to be supported by things such as reliable irrigation schemes. These are some of the key findings that are overlapping across all areas we looked at as we interpreted land reform debates to capture the youth voices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sfiso, for that presentation. And I think one of the, amongst the many important things that you mentioned is the fact of Bloemfontein being one, you know, like being such a student area. And I think one of the movements or things that we've seen out of come out of VETS, for instance, is the accommodation is land, and you know, the students actually engaging on the question of land. And so I'm going to introduce Sivuyile to come into the conversation, who is from the VETS EFF Student Command, who will actually speak on accommodation is land and student struggles. Sivuyile.
Good evening, comrades. How are you?
We are well, leadership. How are you?
I'm well. Well, I've been brought on this platform to engage on accommodation is land, right? So basically, accommodation is land is a program which was devised by the VETS EFF Student Command to tackle the accommodation issues in which Black students are facing in all institutions of higher learning, particularly in the Johannesburg region. So in the program, the conception of the program was in 2016, whereby the VETS EFF targeted South Point Management Services then responded by saying that the issue is the municipality. In 2017, under the capable leadership of Koketso Powo and Secretariat of, we then in 2017, South Point Management Services then responded by saying that the issue is with the city of Johannesburg because the accommodation rates increased on average by 20% per year. So therefore, obviously, if you look at life from a capitalistic lens, you'll understand that the prices will then be borne by the students, right? So what we then did was that when comrades, in 2017 as well, when Herman Mashaba, who was the mayor of the city of Johannesburg at the time, we then, through the EFF in the Johannesburg region, under the capable leadership of the chairperson of the region, Musa Nobela, they agreed when they passed the motion to expropriate buildings. We then asked that 10% of the buildings that will be expropriated in around the city of Johannesburg, that those buildings 10% of them must be given to all institutions of higher learning in Johannesburg. Now that would be CJC, SWGC, VETS, UJ. So it's not just a university problem, but it's also a, what do you call this thing now? A higher education sector problem. Are you with me, my sister? Now, I'm just giving you the bureaucracy and the practicalities of what accommodation is land is. I have not delved into the ideological stance, nor have I engaged on the politics of accommodation is land, right? So what is accommodation is land? Accommodation is land is saying that accommodation is land is basically
so just to get exactly what Will is coming from, in the report itself, there's his case study that actually articulates what is saying. So after this, after this launch, we'll share the report with you, and then you'll actually get the essence of what he was trying to say. We apologize once again because we have to deal with him. His mother passed on, so can you please bear with him as well? So I'd just like to tell you that what is mentioned and the politics around accommodations land is in the report. His case study relaying his thoughts is also in the report. So please bear with us and thank you once again.
Okay. Okay, I think that captures essentially what is needed to be captured. So we do have that case study, and as Mpumi has said, the report will be shared. But just also to moving, the idea of accommodation.
So it wouldn't be rude. Sorry. It wouldn't be rude for me to leave the meeting.
No, it's okay, leadership. I think we understand where you're coming from. So it's fine. You can leave the meeting and we'll share the report so that everyone actually gets an understanding of where you were coming from with the issue of accommodation as land. So it's fine, you're excused. Thank you, leadership, for that. So we're just going to continue and move the conversation to Thembeni will come. Sorry, so we are going to Pinky. Pinky will then assist us in understanding how essentially COVID-19 has impacted organizing and action, and we've seen a lot of organizing around this question of land. So Pinky will touch on that and just give us a brief or an understanding of how COVID-19 has actually affected organizing and action on the question of land. Pinky? Just to remind everyone, please ensure your mics are on mute, and everyone who's a speaker, ensure that your video is on.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. So I want to thank Comrade Spiso and Comrade Sobantu for touch basing on the report and the outcomes from Emalahleni, so that at least everyone now understand where I will be coming from. So before COVID-19, right, organizing has been a bit of a challenge, because as an activist and a number of groups that I've been working with, we have been advocating for environmental rights. And, in our communities, most people, when they see the mining activities, so for them, they see job opportunities and business and so on. So that's where we would differ. And that's where we would experience the divide and rule in our communities. But then either way, we have been organizing and we've had a number of actions. So maybe to point a few of our success struggles, I believe that most of you know the case of Ekolobeni, where they are resisting mining because they understand that land is more important. Because when now we are talking about mining companies or extractives, it means they have a lifespan. If they are saying the quantity and the quality of the mineral that is in this particular area, we will be able to extract it for the next 25 years, then it means after 25 years, then what? And also when mining companies come in our communities, what comes in our mind is they will grab their land, because we have seen a number of these mining companies not doing consultation, and us as communities not giving consent to say, yes, you can continue mining, or no, you can't, right? So if we, either way, if we are saying no, then they use police brutality. So we have seen a number of comrades and community leaders being killed through such struggles. So what's more important is in our organizing, we have, because we know that we are from patriarchal communities, right? And women have been left out for a very long time. So what we have been trying to do is to make sure that women also engage on the issues of land, right? Because we understand our culture where they are saying women can never sit down with men and have a conversation around the issues of land. But we have been trying to make our communities to unlearn such ideologies. So yeah, it has been difficult, but we have been organizing throughout. Then COVID-19 came and we had programs already. Because I remember around February, as people from the mining affected communities, the unemployed people in South Africa, we came together. And in our coming together, we were talking about issues of unemployment, because as much as we are from the mining affected communities, where there's a number of mining companies extracting our coal, still we are unemployed. So that is a crisis. So we had to come together as South Africans to fight against the issue of unemployment. So our campaign, was going on so well, but then we were disturbed by COVID-19. COVID-19 destabilized everything, because from where we are sitting at this point in time, we have lost contact, we have lost touch. Some of the plans that we've had around January, February, we are unable to carry on with them, because we had to be at home and respect all the laws that were given to us by our government to say we must stay at home and do nothing. So our struggle, in a way, is stabilized. Oh, okay.
Mpumi, if you're not saying anything, please mute yourself as well.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. I thought I muted myself. Excuse me.
Everyone, please ensure you're on mute. Sorry, apologies for that, Pinky. Please go on.
Okay, yeah. And also understanding that before COVID-19, we had about 11 million unemployed South Africans. And then COVID-19 came, right? And a number of companies had to shut down. A lot of people lost their jobs and so forth. So I am not sure how, we have to start from scratch, because what we have been saying in February was a number of people will be joining the movement of the unemployed, because we could see already that the economy of our country was not doing well. And most of the mining companies also were closing down. And, so when we've been having the debates to say, then mining companies must just close down, because already we have enough in the JSE, and we have to choose life than to choose the economy, which works for the few, not for the masses of the people of South Africa. So it has been, very hard and tough, but now it has become more hard for us. And during the lockdown, we have seen the rise on gender-based violence cases. We have seen so many things happening, and we were unable, right, to do justice to some of those cases. It was only those who were from different areas and were able to organize during that moment to say, okay, we know this particular person and we'll make sure that this story goes out. But then before COVID-19, we had so many cases in Witbank of the sex workers that Dr. Spiso was speaking about, right? So there's been a number of those cases whereby they have been raped. And when we try to raise such issues, then ordinary people would not support that cause, right? And I am happy that now at least a number of people understand that gender-based violence is an issue, and we all need to hold hands and fight against it. And I'm happy that the president himself has been, talking about it recently. But then the problem is now after Corona, is he still going to talk about it, right? Are we still going to see the adverts on TV talking about the gender-based violence? Because in mining affected communities, this is not a new story, right? We have been experiencing this on daily basis, and nothing has been done about it. So yeah, it's been so hard for us, and we don't know where to start now, because we need to start organizing, because either way, the mining companies are continuing making profit while the poor remains poor. So hopefully we will be able to start again and make sense to a lot of people that when we are saying no to mining, because we have a campaign called The Right to Say No. So when we are saying no to mining, it's not because we don't want employment or we don't want our communities to be developed, but we are saying no because we understand the impacts that come with mining. We understand the gender-based violence that happen in mining affected communities. We understand the land grabs that happen in mining affected communities. We understand the environmental issues that comes with all that baggage. And we understand that also the profit that has been made out of the extractive activities, it doesn't stay in our communities, right? So that we are able as women, young people, to create our own economies and do other activities that will sustain us even after the mining has elapsed. But we have seen all that profit being shifted, taken to tax havens and spent elsewhere, not in the communities where all those activities are taking place. So yeah, it's been so bad. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pinky, for that. And I think you're highlighting very key and very important points that obviously as a country we've been engaging with, and even in the conversation on land, you still think through the question of gender-based violence and what this has actually meant for our communities. And I think you so clearly highlight even how COVID, pre-COVID and post-COVID, how organizing and action has actually been implicated by COVID-19. And just to get us deeper into the conversation, particularly taking it into our communities, Thembeni is actually going to be speaking about accommodation struggles, particularly in Alex. How have people of Alex responded to the challenges of COVID-19? Thembeni is from the ANC Youth League, and she will be speaking to us on accommodation with regards to Alexandra Township. Thembeni?
Sanbonani, as said before, Ikamalam Thembeni Manana, and I'm about to speak about the land question on accommodation and its effects during COVID-19. It has greatly, actually, COVID-19 has greatly exposed the so-called gains of democracy when it comes to land and who owns it. Because as people and residents of Alexandra, we find ourselves sitting in question of socialization. For instance, in Alexandra, we have old bond houses that were given by the apartheid government, which accommodates a family of 14, and you find that it's one room. Now, in a family of 14, you find greatly 2 or 3 types of generations making of that family. Now, what happens then is that it's a one-room house. Firstly, you live with a 14-year-old boy. Ubaba ubuya emsebenzini, umama ubuya emsebenzini, mele bageze. Automatically, that chases the child out of the house, because now umntwana angeke azakhona ukuthi abonele umuntu omdala makageza, which automatically questions the sense of respect that we have within our community and the exposure of sexual activities, crime, poverty, and other things to abantwana base Alexandra. And the exposure further goes to the de-densification of Alexandra. To a certain extent, the government has not actually played its role in making sure that the housing issue is actually untangled. The backlog is actually worked on to make sure that Black families actually find housing, which will automatically give them dignity. When we speak of land in Alexandra, we yet again find ourselves with the Wits University trying to steal our land from us. There's a land space that was donated to the community of Alexandra in 1906. Until this day, Wits University is fighting us in getting and what must be developed on that land. For instance, we want obviously dignity and accommodation for our people, but also for them to participate economically, meaning that we want businesses that will be ran by our people. But we have a Wits University that wants to build a research center on that space, which further then questions the interests of government and private owners to say, to what extent do they want democracy when it comes to land to benefit the majority of the South African society? And right now, the Alexandra community sits to be an image of what makes up a typical township on a daily basis. We are the oldest township, one of the oldest townships in South Africa, and we feed into your places like Diepsloot, Tembisa, Soweto itself, and some of the West Side townships. And reality is that we find ourselves located right at the center of all these big industries such as Sandton, Limbro Park, Kelvin, and Edenvale. And funny enough is that all we do as Alexandra's people, residents, ours is to actually import labor that develops the land space that is in Sandton, Edenvale, Kelvin, and Limbro Park that does not speak to our direct development as people of Alexandra. During COVID, it was even worse because we found ourselves with a government that did not speak to the decentralization of accommodation in Alexandra. We found ourselves with a government that only spoke on food parcels that some actually came with expiry dates of 2015, 2016, even 2017. Now that automatically questions the health situation in Alexandra, that automatically questions poverty in Alexandra, to say what then happens to a family that can't consume food that was manufactured in 2016 because of health issues, not out of pride or anything. Obviously, we are saying Lauma food parcel somehow contributed to the health of the elderly in Alexandra. Automatically, Lauma food parcels contributed to the crime rate of Alexandra because it meant that young people now must go back into the streets. Young people must go back into the streets, even sodomize young boys in order for them to actually make a living within the land space that they are given as government and are located in. So COVID-19 did not only expose participation in the economics, but it also spoke to land. Because in Alexandra, we find ourselves with land spaces that somehow are given to government. Land spaces, that are given to private banks to actually rent out to the community of Alexandra. For example, we've got Butabelo flats, we've got flats in River Park that were expected for the people in Alexandra to go rent out. People of Alexandra, economically and financially, they are not stable. This means now people of Soweto, Orange Farm, Diepsloot will want to come in and actually rent out because they can afford it. But now, what happens within the black race and majority, they end up fighting amongst themselves because no one would allow omunye umuntu ukuthi angene ekas lakhe arente indlu ekubeni ukuthi ngabe kuyena bekahlala kuye as a person who pays ama taxes one way or the other, whether through VAT or through a minimum wage that you get on a monthly basis. So now you find AMA groupings in Alexandra organizing themselves, calling themselves the consent community, calling themselves Dudula. Dudula being one predominantly group that makes sure that ikipama foreign nationals, Uma RDPs, that should be rightfully owned by South Africans. But now that automatically now takes us back to the question of xenophobia. Now, if we are about to take out our own brothers of Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Congo, Malawi from the housing, automatically that ignites a fight amongst Africans in general. So now the exposure does not necessarily speak to the economics, but it has also spoken to our social behavior as the human race. It has also spoken to how we actually relate to other African countries, how we relate to each other as the Black society. So now we take it to an extent where a government will build property in Alexandra through those private banks and actually not allocate individuals in those spaces. Then obviously the community of Alexandra reacts and takes over those properties within that space. Then government would now want to launch a fight. Now you find people who become resistant towards any implementation of the government because the government to a certain extent failed to play their part in making sure that the rightful beneficiaries of that space are actually getting what they deserve. And now we are not raising it as a youth that wants to overthrow government. Wow.
Thembeni? I think we lost her. Okay, we lost Thembeni there, and I think that was such a powerful and Thembeni, are you back? Okay, please unmute yourself, Thembeni.
Apologies, my network dealt with me, but I'm back now.
Okay.
Yeah, so as I was saying is that you find young people in Alexandra, and I say precisely young people because Alexandra is a very young and youthful community. You find young people in Alexandra wanting to organize themselves against government, and not in a spirit of wanting to overthrow any programs or policies they put in place, but young people wanting to protect their dignity, which means we must then, one way or the other, find a way of which we actually meet each other halfway as government and as civil society. Because now, obviously, the role of young people within any space, it is to actually raise uncomfortable questions and debates. Now, government needs to take responsibility. Within the 25 years of democracy that we've actually lived in, it has only been theory and nothing practical. And obviously, we won't spit on things that we've seen happening. But again, we need to question them to make sure that they elevate the standards that they give to Black communities. I mean, when I speak about Black communities, I'm not necessarily touching on our skin color, but I'm speaking about how they've demographically, cosmetically, systematically actually made up townships in the past apartheid, of which it's currently feeding into our current situations. We sit in an Alexandra that actually is literally a stone throw away from Isentin. And Isentin, if I'm to, you actually think I'm being a squabblist about this, but when you enter Sentin, you swear that there are aircons outside because of how fresh the air is. But when you come into Alexandra, the air is corrupted, and not necessarily because of but because sibaningi endaweni eyi-one, the oxygen level yet of what we breathe gets questioned. Collection of debt in Alexandra is actually questioned. In Alexandra, uDodu collector twice a week, where else in Sentin, every day it track. But now, question is, who needs it on a daily basis? Abantu base Sentin noma abantu base Alexandra. And if ever government equally fails to answer that, then we should be, as the community of Alexandra, be able to say, if abantu base Sentin want to share they want to share the wealth of the country with us, we must equally share the filth of the country with them. We must take our struggles to Sentin so that they actually feel it, because you can't speak of land and not touch on other social issues, as I've been trying to touch on them on a simple basis. Right now in Alexandra, we are literally a year away from building houses directly on the pavements because of how dense we are, how unemployment is actually very rife in Alexandra. We are actually a stone throw away of actually building on our roads in Alexandra, because when we find spaces where we want to build on, obviously we are told that they are unsafe. People in Alexandra are building shacks under AMA palings, which is automatically health-wise not safe at all, because you know as a person that you can't live under heavy electrical radiation. That will automatically affect your health, and if you are a pregnant lady, automatically you'll give birth to umntwana ongaphilanga kahle. So land and accommodation in Alexandra does not necessarily speak to land just nje, but it speaks to the direct socialization of people within the space. And the biggest mistake right now that the government is doing is making sure that Black people only speak about land for accommodation. I'm not saying it is completely wrong, but we should be able to actually take it to the economics of it. How do we participate? How do we elevate small businesses within the township to directly...
Sorry, you have 2 minutes, Ne?
Okay, sis.
2 minutes, you can continue.
Directly contribute, small businesses to directly contribute within the main economics. And it is rather unfortunate because of the red taping that is there. It is rather unfortunate because of all the requirements that are expected from umuntu ongakwazi ukuthi register a company, because they simply can't pay that 175 rand. Immediately, if you can't sustain yourself, it means you can't sustain and protect your land space and accommodation where you actually live. So we need to be able to poke and question everything else into making sure that the land question thoroughly gets answered to a point where everybody benefits completely. And like I always say, if you are not interested in politics one way or the other, politics will be interested in you. I mean, people may not be politically inclined, but unfortunately the conditions of Alexandra will automatically make them want to react without them knowing which it's a political move that they are doing. So we need to be able to actually put the government into a tight corner in making sure that they make sure that the land expropriation happens without anyone getting paid. Step number one. How do you hijack me on N1, take my car, then you go and pimp it up, you put sound music, you give it ama megs amasha, you put a sunroof, and when I find it, you want me to pay back for pimping up the car. I did not ask you to steal it. So we should be realistic on what we actually want from the government and what the government should deliver to the majority of Abantu Base South Africa in general, not necessarily Abantu Base Alexandra. So the land question will automatically over time become a futile exercise if the government does not speak to the economics of the land entirely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thembeni, for that passionate delivery. And I think you really touched on very important and key issues in terms of like marrying this question to the lived experiences of Black people and how landlessness essentially manifests itself in the lives of Black people. And you beautifully juxtaposition essentially, the lived experiences of Alexandra people with that of those people that live in Sandton, and also highlighting the question of class and the question, many questions actually bringing in an intersectional lens in your presentation. That was so beautiful, and I think a lot of us agree with most of what you said today. Just to kind of, so the next speaker is our last speaker, so I'm gonna need people to actually prepare their questions. You can type out a very concise question on the chat group, or you can, of course, raise your hand. And if you do raise your hand, and you must make sure you speak, concisely and keep it short. I will cut off people. I'm going to be very brutal on this. I will cut off people if you take too long in your question. But I think just prepare your question, because the next speaker is our last speaker, Phethani, who will be discussing Atangari village and the struggles of farmers, especially youth in Limpopo. But just briefly and quickly, Mpumi wanted to say something before we go on to Phethani. So Mpumi?
Yeah, thank you once again, Thembeni and Pinky. I just wanted to add that in the report, Thembeni's case study with Busiso and then Sivuile and other members of EFF and ANC Youth League is in section 2 of the report. So you can get further information as to how they deal with the land struggles in the inner city as well as townships. And we also covered Kliptown Youth Program and their struggles in Kliptown. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mpumi. So Phethani, please come through and just, give us your piece.
Oh, no, thank you, Chair. I will start off by briefly speaking about the issues about around land struggles that we have faced in different spaces, not just only in the rural area where I come from, in the village of Matangari, but also the kind of struggles that we have championed in institutions of higher learning, especially around Sharkville, and also the occupations of land in Khayelitsha, and most recently young people of the EFF and the PAC and from BASMA have also embarked on a journey, the Josie to Stellenbosch journey, where they were raising the most important issues about land and why 26 years later do we remain dispossessed as the African people. Briefly to touch onto the land struggles that are happening in rural areas where I'm from, in the village of Matangari, you'll find that up in the north, you will see that there was sort of like a late arrival of white people into the north because of evidently 100 years of frontier wars which were fought in the Eastern Cape mostly, and the struggles that happened in the inner land of the country. So you will find that the land question in Limpopo, or mostly in Venda, people have access to land, but the problem then becomes that the land that they have access to still remains very much backwards in terms of agricultural development, in terms of the fact that you find that people are still using hand hoes as the means of farming, but whereas you will find that there are counterparts in farms that are owned by people like ZZ2. I'm sure everyone knows about ZZ2. It's the big company that produces tomato and supplies tomato in the country. So the issue here, you find that young people who are based in these rural areas find themselves unable to utilize the land in a manner in which they can be able to compete or be able to produce food or products in the scale in which white farmers in the country can be able to do so. As you can see through, if you when you get the report, you will see that the farmers the young farmers that we had interviewed were young students that went to institutes of higher learning in Gauteng or other provinces in the country, but did not succeed in terms of getting employment. When they find that they relocate back to their villages, and when they do that, they start using the land that is there. But the problem then becomes that the use of that land is not very productive, in the sense that first and foremost, you are still caught in backwards forms of agriculture, and those forms of agriculture are competing with established farmers like ZZ2, who has been farming since like probably in the early 1900s or in the 1950s. So in this irrigation scheme of where I'm born from, where I come from in Atangari, you'll find that the land that is there is not being utilized, mainly because there are no economic incentives that are happening in such spaces. Like myself, when I matriculated from high school, of course I had to go to Gauteng or to the institutes of higher learning, whereas there's the question of the land that has been left behind that is not being utilized at all. So you will find that the issues that start to emerge around in the rural areas. Remember that unlike in big cities like in Alexandra or in townships, you don't have an issue of chiefs or kings that exist. And then in rural areas, you have to deal with the issue of dual governance. So in that sense, since there has been a proposal that has been put before Parliament in the around the bill of the Traditional Council Bill and the Khoisan Leadership Bill, which will further give kings or chiefs in numerous villages powers to decide on what they're supposed to do with this land. So as I've already highlighted, that most of the people, most of young people aspiration is to go to school, and then when you matriculate, you leave the village and go and seek more better economic opportunities in big cities, like as I did myself. But when you look at it, you see that actually there is a high sense, or there's a high probability of economic activities around the land that you have left behind in the places where you are born from. But without any support from the government, you cannot be able to do anything, because you cannot be competing with people who have high specialized technology of farming, whereas I'm still relying on hand hoes and also relying on seasonal rainfall. That is the primary of that is the primary of the struggle that faces young people and rural farmers in Limpopo, is that there is no support from the government at all. And since there was the design of this irrigation scheme that exists in Matanga, in the village where I come from, so you find that it stretches around 15 kilometers in between 7 villages, and the main source of water is it is a river that has been cut to create a canal that supplies water to these various irrigation spaces. But since I will say since around 2005 up until now, you'll find that most of this land is no longer being utilized, and the people who were relying on agriculture at the time are no longer doing that. But evidently, because the canal system has been worn out and there's been less rainfalls in these places, so people are forced to migrate and also go and live in big cities in Gauteng. And also it creates another issue of overpopulation, and then it brings the question that Comrade Thembeni was speaking about, of over concentration of people in townships, and then the question of land where there is no land for housing. So looking at it dialectically, the fact that there are no economic activities in rural areas, people are forced to leave their rural areas and go and settle in Gauteng, which is the most economically integrated city, or the most integrated province in the country. And when people migrate into that place, then it creates another further problem of the land question. Whereas if the government was serious or looking into the fact that they can create specialized economic zones that exist outside Gauteng, so you find that in the village where I come from, where I've spoken about the fact that there's lots of land that is there, but it is not being utilized, and that underutilization of the land, in line with the cohesion and leadership bill that is proposed now, you will find that young emerging petty bourgeoisie capitalists who have aspirations of using the land for other purposes. So primarily, the main economic activity that happens in the Matangari village is that people are relying mostly on the land, although it's no longer that active as in the past. But if that farming scheme is destroyed, it means that the other form of activities that exist there is jobs that include being a teacher or just being nurses, but they are not as economically active as the other jobs that you can find in the big cities. So the problem then becomes here now that if the chiefs or the kings are empowered by this new proposed bill that is before Parliament, it means that they can be able to now decide what they're going to do with that land, which was demarcated for farming in the past. So once that land is no longer being used for farming, it means that there's going to be an issue of around on where the source of the food is going to come from. And once that becomes a problem, because now, as if you have been following what's happening up in the north, in Limpopo, especially in Venda, we used to have a coal mine called Sobantu Mine, which used to supply Eskom, but it was closed in 2011. And as you might, of course, correctly guess, that there was no sense of development which was left behind by this mine at all. And what is currently happening is that in one of the main sources where the most big rivers in Venda come from, because if you look at the escarpment of Venda, you'll find that there are some areas which are high-lying. So in this high-lying area where it is known as Lake Funzani, I'm sure people have heard about it. It is rumored, actually, because I have followed up and read a report in which there has been a positive identification of minerals, mostly minerals that belong to the platinum group metals. That is mostly metals that are around Rustenburg. It's the same kind of mineral content that is around Rustenburg. So the issue that is happening now is that the chief and petty emerging bourgeoisie, they're trying to start to mine in that area, and they have been given a right to mine by the DMR, but there has not been any community consultation at all. So it's the same kind of similar struggle that is happening in Kolobeni, because now the argument that they're using is that the people are no longer farming, so therefore we can be able to start this mining that has been identified in this area. But if they start that process of mining in that place of around Funzani Lake, it is going to disrupt three main.
Phethani. Okay, I think we lost Phethani. Oh, the network is bad. So I think I'll suggest at this point that we actually move on because it seems like Phethani is not coming back. What's happening? But we'll allow him to continue if he does find connection back. So I've noted hands and I've seen questions on the group chat. So what I'm gonna do is to take 5 hands for this one round, and then we'll have a second round where I will take another 5 questions again.
Phethani
Mpumi?
Phethani is back.
Phethani?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm back now. I was looking for you to finish. Yeah, I'm back.
Oh, okay, sure. Continue. You have,
Okay.
I think, about 3 minutes.
Okay. As I was saying that the issue of push and pull factors that are happening in the rural communities where there is access to land, and the land that is there is mostly demarcated for farming, but there's not been overt support from that is coming from the government. It forces people to live or migrate to big cities, and when they move to big cities, of course, we're not going to be able to afford the rents of Centon and wherever. We are forced to go and cramp together with our relatives in the township, and also it creates an issue of housing, as the comment that spoke before me was speaking about. So the biggest issue that is happening around rural areas is that you find that there are young people who are interested in farming, but as they cannot be able to break into the monopoly that exists, that has already been established by big white farmers in big cities, or also people like ZZ2 who has completely monopolized the tomatoes market in the country. These lands which exist in this place have the ability to produce such kind of products, but they don't have support at all. So it forces young people to also move into big cities in Gauteng and wherever in the country to leave the land behind vacant. And when that land is left behind vacant, also in line with what's happening in Parliament with these new bills which are proposed, it means that the chiefs are at liberty to do with whatever they please with that land. They can sell it, then they can hire it and whatever. And as I was saying, that there's a struggle that is happening right now, that they want to bring a mine in the place where there is Lake Funzani. And once they do that, it means that they're going to destroy the most important livelihood that the rural people in Venda rely on, which is mostly based on farming. And I think for me, it is important that we can be able to link these three struggles that we're speaking about. That there's an issue of there's an issue of housing that is happening in Gauteng around townships that was speaking about, that they are overcrowded, mostly because people cannot continue to live in the rural areas. They are forced to migrate and go to big cities because there's no economic activity that is happening in the place. There's hunger, and nothing happening at all. So once we are able to link all these struggles happening to the central question around the land, on how we can be able to help, or how we can be able to mitigate these factors and be able to help young people who are interested in farming in rural areas, so that they can be able to produce and be part of the broader market. But it's not going to happen without the struggle. And it is very clear that the mine that I spoke about, as I checked in the last month or so, that the community is not agreeing with the question that the mine must be opened in this place, because they are worried about what's going to happen to their source of water for their livestock, and also for farming. So I think those are the kind of struggles that we must be focused on, and also can help young people and also the youth on how we can be able to move forward and face these struggles of land wherever they're happening. If they're happening in institutions of higher learning, they're happening in our townships, and also happening in the largely neglected rural areas. I think I'll wrap up there.
Thank you so much, Phethani, for that. And you, as others as well, have highlighted just how capitalism is so organized, and how it actually ensures that, like how it essentially manifests itself in our lives and in the rural areas, and how people are kind of like sort of their agency is taken away from them, having a say in terms of what should happen to their land and the places in which they reside in is taken away from them. And you so brilliantly highlighted some of the conditions that are happening in the rural areas, particularly in Venda in this case. So moving forward, sorry, I'm gonna need people to, so I've noted hands. So what I'm gonna do is to take 5 questions for this round and then take another 5 questions in the next round. Please, no preambles, Blacks. Just straight to the point and ask the question that you need to ask. And please do state who you are directing the question to. If it's any of the panelists. And also, I would love for the panelists to actually note their own questions, because I'm not going to repeat the questions in order to for time's sake. So ensure that the panelists should ensure that they note their own questions, and anyone who asks a question should state who they are directing the questions to. I've seen one question which I would just read in the group chat from Rod, who asked for a, let me just go to the question quickly. So Rod asked, this is a question to Thembeni. How do we balance the issue of illegal immigration, illegal invasions by the same illegal immigrants without being xenophobic? Do you think it's xenophobic to prioritize locals first? I hope, Thembeni, you've noted that. So I'm going to take the 4 hands that I'm seeing. Okay, so it's 5 because I see Zukiswa as well. So the hands that I've noted is Black Rose, you go first, and then Mzaifani will go second, Andy will go third, Tiamo, you'll go fourth, and then Zukiswa, you will go last. So Black Rose, please go. Please ask your question.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mibone from Northwest in Marikana. The chairperson or you, ma'am, I don't know your name. I think you are dictating to us when you say, sorry?
Funzani.
Oh, Funzani.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please note who you are directing the question to now.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
But I want to correct the statement that you've just made before we ask questions. You said we must not preamble. I think it will be important for me to preamble first so that my question can be understood. I cannot ask a question without giving a thorough explanation of where my question is coming from. I'm more interested in Thembeni Manana's presentation.
Please make it brief, leadership. I'm going to ask you, like, kindly and respectfully, we just make it brief. Even if you give a preamble, just make sure that it's brief, because we're taking other questions as well.
Yes, I respect that. But if you keep intervening while I'm speaking, you are the one who's taking my time. I should be finished by now.
Continue.
Okay. Thembeni Manana, this is the big issue that we are talking about. This is the issue of land. It's not just any other issue that can be discussed over the night and get solutions on. But my interest is that you are from ANC. As the youth in the ANC is the one that has failed us so far. So what have you done in the ANC to shake those old people in this in ANC on the issue of land? Because it cannot be accepted that as the youth on other provinces that is not even ANC members accept what ANC is doing to us, fold hands and pretend as if we don't even care about what ANC is doing. At the end of the day, what Comrade Pinky also made a presentation, spoke about many issues, and as an activist also in the mining community, I am more concerned on the issue of land grabs. again, the very same issue, I put it back to ANC because of is the government. When there are land grabs in an area where mining is happening, the Department of Human Settlement should be held accountable on this issue, because of when we lease the contract, we lease the land for the mining to mine. We lease the land on a basis that the mine will conduct business, not bring people that will work for the mine, because of where they will mine, already there are people there who are supposed to work for the mine. So the government should address this issue of land grabs. My last question will go again from Thembeni Manana. You said on 1906 you were donated land. I would like to know who donated this land, because of, according to my understanding, the South African Archives for Land Issues. I think if we all go and visit this office, perhaps we should get answers, because of on this issue of Alexander, where I'm sitting, I think the owner of this land is the very same owner of Alexander and other places around Joburg. So if Alexander people say they own Alexander, today I've got news for you. You don't own Alexander. There are people who own Alexander, and as I speak, the government even knows that those people are claiming their land back. They want their land back. So imagine owning the land for so many years and you didn't have the right for the land. So when you have to make a decision that is supposed to happen in Alexander, who's going to be given priority on decision making when it comes to the land? Because of the land owner right now is currently claiming their land back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Black Rose, for that. Zaifani, please come through with your question.
Oh, I don't answer immediately. Also.
Okay. I'm gonna take, sorry, Thembeni, I'm gonna take all the five. Said please note your questions as panelists. So I'll take all the five and then you respond after. Zaifani, please come through with your question.
Mzwakali?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. First and foremost, I would direct my question to Sobantu. Based on the report covers three aspects, but the report leaves one aspect, land for economic activity, which is not addressed in that report, which I think I felt that it needed to be addressed, because me now I am from Ekurhuleni. The Gauteng government speaks of township economy. So even on that one, young people need land for businesses. So I think one of the aspects that we need to touch in, because business, I speak in a sense that we speak of the township economy, but even rural areas, their own economic sides as the rural people. But the issue of land for economic purposes, we can speak whatever that we want to speak on the land. And if you would remember, there was a report that was done on how the land of South Africa, these white people got title deeds. Majority of them got title deeds after 1994. So when you question, even the preamble of our constitution says thoroughly that this constitution is adopted to heal the divisions of the past. One, we have not done that. And Thembeni has outlined thoroughly on the social aspects that are there, that are caused by the land. So to my side is that we reaffirm the 24th.
Please conclude, leader.
Yeah, I'm concluding. We reaffirm the 24th National Conference of the ANC Youth League on the basis that we need to expropriate land without compensation, and we need to expropriate these mines, because we cannot solve these issues if we are not moving into that direction. And lastly, the policy on this to deal with xenophobia, I think we need to have a policy that directs that non-South African citizen cannot have cannot own the land. I close. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Zaifani. Zukiswa, can you please come through with your question? I think it's Zukis was coming next. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think I was
Thank
number
you.
3.
Oh,
okay.
Wait, who was number 3? Andy.
Andy Shabalala.
Okay, that's fine. Andy, please go through.
Sorry, before I go on, just to steal a minute of your time. By questions, did you mean that we can't specifically make statements? Should we specifically make ask questions directly without commentary?
Yeah. Yes, please, if you can do that, please do that, because time also. So respectfully, can you just go straight to the question?
Noted.
Sure.
I think my name is Andy Shabalala. I'm a community activist of the ANC Youth League in Alexandra. I just want to note that to everyone who's listening, I think it's important to note, if you consider yourself a revolutionary or a leader of young people in society, having this conversation, you are wasting young people's time. Because if we are to say that we are leading young people on the land question, we should be going and claiming land. None of these conversations about who deserves land, who doesn't deserve land. We should just go claim land, direct young people to that land and occupy land and take it. If it must be done with violence. Number 2, because also landlessness is violent. Number 2, if we don't agree with that, just to direct my question to Comrade Phethani Madzivhandia there, he spoke of ZZ2 and young people who are farming in the rural areas. I think he was speaking about particularly looking at the skills and the machinery, or maybe the equipment, or rather the resources that these two parties have in advancing their agricultural needs. So, as young people, directed to him, what societal skills do we need to say these are the skills, particularly, or scientific advancements that we need to make as a group, as a collective, particularly Black, to say this is what we need to do moving forward to address how we want to shape societies, particularly speaking to agriculture? That is my other question. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, for that. So I assume it's you, Zukiswa, that comes after, if I'm not mistaken.
It was me, but Zuki can.
Yeah, Mo.
Zuki can go. I'll go after her.
Oh, easily too. Thank you, Rethink Africa, for this sitting. Mine is really brief and directed to Upoko Phethani Africa, and we speak about how to we popularize land struggle and land justice, which is essentially a people struggle. For example, the Alliance for Rural Democracy is doing incredible work, right, in the Bantustans of this country. But what we find generally when you engage in land justice, whether it's trying to link homelessness in the informal settlement to the question of land, or whether you're trying to link the underdevelopment of the Bantustans to the fact of landlessness, we are struggling as young activists to sort of penetrate that space in meaningful ways, right, and build a popular movement. So I'm interested, in fact, to the older panelists that, okay, we have this information, we have revolutionary vanguards such as the PAC, for example, who've been advocating for the question of land, and organizations in the civil space like the Alliance for Rural Democracy, amongst others. What is our work? So the research is there, the analysis is there. I am interested to find out from these young activists, how do we really, where do we start, and why is it that we are struggling to really make the connections between the issues that affect young people and the question of our landlessness and the urgency around, the return of land, evidence in recent movements such as Josie Stellenbosch, for instance. So mine is just, a question. Thank you so much to the panelists. Izvilet.
Africa June. Thank you, Zukiswa. Tiamo, you're next.
Okay. Just a short question, probably to the researchers first. The major thing is that I'm seeing there's a they divide in terms of rural-urban divide, but then South Africa has got a plan of a 2050 where most or the majority, which is about 75% of all South Africa, would be urban. Did we look in the research tried to tease out exactly as to how South Africa would be looking like, and what then would be access to opportunities, access to economy, and access to land within that, in the general sense of form. And then the second question is probably to all of the panelists, following Zwikisa's question, is that what are the action points, especially in relation to issues of food security, given that the UN also has got this, UN Habitat has got the plan of saying within 2050, like 80% of everybody would be living in cities. Issues of access to intellectual property and intellectual indigenous seeds for us to be able to feed ourselves. Have we thought in and around those particular issues when we're talking about economy? Have we thought about the survival of the people, because it is young people anyway that are the majority currently that needs to live within that particular future? And what is the imagined future of young people living within urban settings, the majority, and them having to survive without owning any type of the seeds? We know that 80% of the seeds currently are owned by Monsanto. The structural adjustment programs are in such a way that you actually are giving out your own culture and livelihoods in order for you to be able to have whatever developmental plans are there. So is there a thought beyond just the notion that we want land? And then lastly, to people that are living within townships and densified townships, have you thought ever of the program of, if there's such a word, de-densification of townships? Places like Alexandra are unsustainable. Why can't we be looking at relocating people away from places like Alexandra to somewhere else, where livelihood needs to come into place, which is sustainable and anything like that? You cannot have an Alexandra perpetuate itself and recreate itself the way that it is for anything sustainable to happen within that particular thing. Let us think about de-densification, if there's such a word within that notion. In essence, yeah, in essence. And then just lastly, the greatest land grabs are happening in urban areas, in places like Midrand and everything else. What is the responses of young people in terms of that? What are the creative means that we need to go get and say that if at all we're going to take land, how are you going to take those particular land for living and for sustainable livelihoods? Thank you.
Thank you, Tiamo, for that question. I've been very lenient actually with, but so I'm gonna go on and give the panelists an opportunity to respond. Thembeni, I'm gonna give you the opportunity first to actually respond. Sobantu, you will come after Thembeni, and then we will have Phethani, Sfiso, and then Pinky.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of the session. I think the first misconception that we need to deal with is the thinking that there are no radicals or radical thinkers within the ANC. And we can also equally not erase the fact that the radical resolution of the takeover and ownership of land was made by the ANC Youth League to hit the ground running. And yes, I can't say the ANC is perfect. Hence, they have a youth wing that thoroughly questions and debates their policy position to the satisfaction of a Black person from a typical township. So obviously the ANC has not done the greatest till now, 25 years later. But we also can't ignore the fact that there are some things that the ANC did. The ANC might have actually given out a certain percentages of RDP houses, and we're grateful to that, but we equally can't stay at that level. We need to be able to question them, to move further, to make sure that ultimately the beneficiary is to every Black individual within a community, because it becomes a shame again to be a young person and wanting to fight for a government house. So we'd rather fight the ANC to make sure that our mothers rightfully get the houses that they were supposed to actually get back. Then us as young people
thoroughly fight the ANC to make sure that the land policy now directly speaks to us owning land, making sure that we actually get fertile land to reproduce in that land space, make sure that we actually get land to run economics on that land, make sure that we get land to run proper education for our kids and proper generations. So we need to do away with the idea that the ANC does not have radicals who actually questions the policy positions of the ANC. And we're also not dismissing the fact that we have not done our 100% as the ANC, but it is our duty as young people of the ANC to make sure that the ANC works to its full capacity to make sure that it ultimately gives back Black people what rightfully belongs to them. And just to quickly educate Black Rose on the history of Alexandra. Alexandra was a farm donated to us by Mr. Donated to us, sorry, I may not know the farmer's name, but the farmer's wife was Alexandra, donated to the people of Alexandra and named it after his wife. Now, the land space that I'm talking about that was donated to Alexandra, it is a minute, if not two, away from Alexandra, in the outskirts of Alexandra, which was donated by Mr. Alfred, who currently runs his kids, because he does not exist anymore, his kids and grandchildren run a foundation in Alexandra. They can, I mean in London, excuse me, they can actually even give you letters and other wills where he states that that land space must be given to people of Alexandra. Now, that land space, or when Mr. Alfred donated it to Alexandra, he said— Please wrap up, Thembeni. He wants, Mr. Alfred, yes, Mr. Alfred, he wants it to be used for educational purposes to better develop the farmers' children by the time who lived on the farm of Alexandra. There is no one who is trying to claim back Alexandra, but currently the people of Alexandra wanting to claim the land space that was given to them by Mr. Alfred through Wits Trust, which is under the Wits Trust. Now, the thuggery that's been done by the Wits Trust is them wanting to use it for their personal gains and not consult or include people of Alexandra. Now, their biggest mistake at Wits is that they only want to use that land space for research purposes, meaning they want to bring reptiles and grow indigenous plants there to try and find medication and other sorts of things. But as a concerned community of Alexandra, we are saying we want to see a college, a varsity being built on that ground. But equally to the process and dealing with our current conditions, we want houses for our people in Alexandra to deal with the heavy population of Alexandra. We equally want economics to actually happen on that land space. We want agriculture to happen on that space if the land is fertile enough for us to grow things there. So Black Rose is raising important questions rather, but in the process of it all, it's important to equally get your facts straight. I don't even mind taking your context right here so that I can share documentations with you of Mr. Alexandra, Mr. Alfred in London, who has actually donated the land through the Wits Trust for the people of Alexandra. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Thembeni. Sobantu, please respond to the questions.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank everyone with the engagement this far. I think firstly, I would like to attend to the question posed by Phethani. I think the question around using land as an economic activity, maybe is the phrasing of the question, we might have been lost in that, but then with how we have phrased, in fact, with how we have also phrased these set of or these thematic areas, we realize that other two thematic areas is actually around the land as housing and then also as land as mining. So I'm sorry, land as mining as well as land as agriculture as well. So that already speak to the economic activity of land. Then the question then maybe should be then about the youth involvement in that regard. And I think this is the only focus of this research, to see then how do we see youth participation in this regard. So you cannot dismiss that land as agriculture and land as mining remain as the use of land for economic activities and economic participation. So thus, as land remains in the hands of the few, or if the land then continue not to be given, or also not be in the hands of the youth, then it pushes the youth also to the marginalization of the entire economy. So I think maybe there are other aspects of land as economy that are not maybe dealt by the research. I mean, each and every research will come with its limitation based on its focus and thematic areas. But then I think those two key thematic areas, land as mining and land as agriculture, does speak or do speak to the use of land as an economy, and then the marginalization of youth in that regard. And secondly, I think, as also alluded to some of maybe limitations and everything else, I mean, the question was, why are we still struggling? I mean, I might not give a thorough answer into that, but I mean, with what has been quoted, of what others have been saying, the likes of PAC and others, without sounding as very, I don't know, dismissive or anything, but some of us who've been engaging in the land sector, especially in the issues of policy engagement and policy development around issues of land reform, whether it's restitution, redistribution, and land security. I mean, we also might agree that some of our, especially old movements or party organizations, have not provided anything or any analysis in the last 10 or so years as well. So there is also a stagnant of information or engagement with the land question from other facts, from especially engaging with the developments. I mean, you might have seen even with when there was a rise of the expropriation of land without compensation, there were so many people coming up, but then if you decipher the message and you look at what are their proposals as well, you will see that most of what we consider to, even us as part of the left, should also be criticizing this, that there was a short of analysis as well. So then when it comes to what does this research aims to do, for me is that regard that most spaces that we like that are very radical, if you engage in them, then you realize that most people aren't even updated about the current development within the land reform sector, whether it's land redistribution, land restitution, or even security obtained. So then in that regard, so I think then research then serve a purpose of providing this information. I mean, we also have seen when we were doing this research in other communities, I mean, issues related to social and economic marginalization of people have also receiving the information. So then in our context then is to provide information and hoping that the youth will use this information, I mean, the policy developments, the policy update of what is happening in the land sector, what the land sector is, and use that in their own mobilizing and organizing forward. So then ours was to provide the information from where in our own research have seen information missing. So I hope this will serve as information, and then people then can engage much more better when they continue with their radicalization from mostly an informed perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, Sobantu. Please prepare for the next round of questions, guys. This will be the last round of questions. And for me, please, at the end, please remind me for you to actually just speak about the date of the release of the report, because people are asking about when will the report be available for the public. So I'm going to ask Phethani to come in and respond to some of the questions that the audience have posed.
Thank you, Chair. I will start with the question that came from Comrade Andy. He asked about agricultural development and technology that Black people can focus on. My response to that is simple and clear, that the technology of agricultural advancement is already there. It's just that it has not been provided to rural young farmers that are trying to get into the industry or trying to get to the business of farming. It's not that Black people need to invent some magical kind of agricultural technology that exists. I mean, the land is going to respond to the same kind of technology that exists already, that has been monopolized by big farmers like ZZ2 or big white African farmers that mostly are farming in areas like in Lichtenberg, in the Northern Cape, in the Northwest and other places. So the issue of technology is not that the technology is not there, is that the technology has been deliberately sabotaged into being accessed by other people who can use it. The question that was asked by Comrade Zukisa, she asked that how do we link these struggles that are happening in different places, in rural areas, in townships, and the issues of higher learning. I think also to touch on what Sobantu has highlighted or responded on, the fact that there's been a heavy discord with around the movements that exist today and the movements on the left in responding to the land question, as we have seen with the coming back of the land discourse around the exploitation of land without compensation, and we find that the left in this country has been unable to respond politically or also ideologically in providing clarity on what on the kind of struggles that we're supposed to carry forward, and those are issues that we find ourselves confronting in today's time. That post 1994, there's been a heavy depoliticization of our people, and also it has led into the heavy degeneration of the movements of the left, and most of the time they are found lagging when questions like this rise, and when questions like this around the land come up again, but unable to respond because they are still caught, or we are still caught in trying to fix the fact that we are in a post-1994 South Africa that did not respond to the land question at all, and has compromised on those basic principles on why we went into the struggle in the first place. So I think for me, we need to build the left and more revolutionary movements that can be able to respond to the struggle.
Please wrap up.
And also to touch on to the question that Siamo spoke about. He spoke about that the land grabs which are happening in places like Midrand or places like Khayelitsha or in different townships that we find ourselves in. So the issue for me here is that, of course, the struggle is not that we are going to continue to be occupying land in the townships, because there is no way that we imagine a future that we are still going to have townships. We want to move out of townships and be able to occupy other spaces that have been monopolized in terms of land by the white people currently in South Africa. So for me, to respond on the question also around food security, is that it is also very important that these young farmers who are emerging in rural areas are equipped with the necessary skills and technology so that they can be able to provide the questions around food security, so that we can be able to, when we have the land, we can also be able to respond adequately to food security, and also making sure that there's integrated technology with the people. Thank you completely.
Thank you, Phethani. Please note, comrades, that I'm taking hands. Please raise your hands so that I can note you. So I need Swiso to come through and answer your questions.
Thank you all for your questions. I'm not so sure which one was directed to me, but I will just give my comment. My comment simply being that land questions in Southern Africa generally, not in South Africa, is a problem of colonization, and its resolution must be nothing short of complete decolonization, which is being led by the young people. So such kind of projects, in my view, are a step towards the right direction, whereby we're taking strategies of the formerly marginalized and the landless poor in order to inspire theory. Maybe coming from an academic side, practice cannot be divorced from theory, and in my view, it is very important to understand that it is partial liberation that is protecting the property rights of colonial era landlords. So if we understand that these strategies are part of the broader decolonization processes, that decolonization strategies that are happening currently and that are being led by young people. So in a way, it will, taking these strategies and their stories helps a lot in
Please wrap up.
in informing theory, which is not divorced from practice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Spisa, for that. Pinky, you can come through.
Thank you. So there was no question directed to me, but then I have 2 points that I want to raise. Number one, land speaks to dignity, right? And if someone takes away your land, they're simply stripping of your dignity. And as soon as the young people of South Africa, we grab that, then we will go far, right? We won't be coming together, bringing our organizations and so forth, but we'll understand that we are fragmented, which means we need to unite and fight to get back what's ours, to regain our dignity. I have learned few strategies from my friends in Brazil. They don't waste time. They occupy land because they understand that they need land to produce food. They need land to start their own businesses. They need land for a number of, of things. So until, as the young people of this country, we decide to come together and be united and demand and fight in solidarity, talk to the issues of land. I believe this will be like the starting point, because we have been talking about it for years now, but maybe we should use this platform as our starting point and move forward to demand and make action, because if we will continue talking in such platforms, then there won't be any action. Mina, I am for action, right? Because we have been exhausted the topic of the land issue for quite some time. So we need to do something now. So yeah, it's up to us, by the way. We'll see what is it that we actually want to do. If we want land, then let's go and occupy that land.
Thank you, Pinky, for that. So I think the last round of questions, and so far I think there's just only one hand up. There isn't any questions on the group chat, if I'm not mistaken. So what I'm gonna do is to take that last question, and I'm gonna ask the panelists to be closing. And a very brief closing, since we just have only one hand up. And also just for communication, the report will be posted on Facebook, Twitter, and in the Zoom chat after this launch. So you can follow Rethink Africa on Twitter and on Facebook. That's where you will actually get the report. So yeah, so I'm gonna take Leo's hand and then have the panelists respond to that question and then close for the sake of time. Leo?
Revolutionary greetings and thank you, Funzani, for the opportunity. I was part of the youth. I'm out of it, but unfortunately, the struggles still remain the same. Everything that was raised here is issues that are pertinent, were pertinent before, even before 1944 with the Youth League and so forth. So just to come out straight, there's not like questions because of there's countless questions that have been raised, but then this is more of an engagement session. Firstly, the ANC cannot necessarily be discussed here, but then the ANC-led government, that's the one that we need to be discussing. Because remember, we've got a government, we've got democracy. So in everything that you are doing, we must make sure that we work according to the systems that are in place for this country to function correctly. So it's not the ANC, it's the ANC-led government. I just thought maybe I should just clear that part up. And then also, in terms of the Gauteng government, I know there's a member of the provincial government also in the Zoom meeting. There are talks currently at the moment to make laws that will say that companies need to be, or not even necessarily companies, businesses operating in townships need to be 51% South African owned. That process is in the way. That's what the researchers need to be telling us about, so that we can spread the message, so that we can get the youth to be ready, so that they can implement those things that are going to be happening. Because now it doesn't help to say, okay, all foreign-owned shops must close, we want South Africans, but then there's nobody that is ready to actually make sure that they can follow up on such laws that are in the process. And then also there was a comrade from, I think, Venda. You mentioned that the mines there, because of people are not farming, so they're gonna take away food security by converting those farmlands into mines. The Kolobeni judgment, that is a historical judgment for South Africa, because now it allows communities to have access to the information about what the mines are promising to do. Because a lot of the times, we hear that they're saying that people are, or the mines are going to be doing 1, 2, 3, 4 for communities. But then none of those things are done because of there's no paper, there's no information that we know as to exactly what's supposed to happen. So it is important that we use access to information to get the information, because of maybe it might not necessarily be a bad decision to find out what the mines are promising. I'm wrapping up, Funzani, sorry about that. But then yeah, access to information is there. Unfortunately, we are in the 4th industrial revolution. We missed out on the 3rd revolution, which is the information age. So we actually need to be playing catch up here in South Africa. To have access to information, it means that our researchers must make sure that they have everything all in a box, so that when they share everything that will work for us. And then also we need more conversations like this, especially when it comes up to the land expropriation bill. So I'm wrapping up right now, Comrade Funzani. I'm not sure if you are muted or you are stopping me, but then let's do that. Thank you again for this platform, and let's make sure that we have further ones, and please do not be afraid to invite us. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you, Leo, for that. So what I'm gonna do is to just give the panelists some time to respond to that question, and then quickly give their closing, because I think time, we spent so much time on this conversation. So I'm gonna give Pinky, because you were the last one to speak. I'm just gonna give you guys each a minute, comrades, to just respond, and then close. Pinky, then I'm gonna give Sfiso, and then Phethani, Sobantu, and Thembeni.
Okay, thank you. So what I want to say quickly is we need to learn from the struggles of Kolobeni and other and how those communities ended up, winning their struggles and so forth. Because, well, now we can say Kolobeni has won their struggle, but let me tell you, the struggle still continues, because the mining company is not giving up. So how do we then support? How do we, support them? How do we support the comrades in Kolobeni so that they continue fighting, they don't lose hope and so forth? So, as I have said earlier, that we have power as the young people of this country, and we are so many, and most of us are unemployed. So maybe we just need to find ways on how then do we unite and fight to get back what's ours, which is the land. So yeah, I will just stop there.
Sfiso, please come through. Please note that the research report is on the chat group as well. So if you guys need to just look at it in the meantime, you can do so. Sfiso?
I'm not so sure if I got the question well, but what I got is that the speaker also spoke about the action points, which are captured as part of recommendations, which because of time, we didn't get time to go through a set of recommendations that we came up with from the perspectives and aspirations of the youth. But the set of recommendations that we made as Rethink Africa are at the end of the report. Thank you.
Sfiso? Thank you for that. So we're gonna go for, I think, Phethani, you're next.
Okay. Oh yeah. I'm the oldest next. For me, the comrade that just made his contribution earlier on, I think it takes us to the fact that post 1994, the ANC-led government has failed to provide an alternative or to respond on the issues that are facing the people, especially on the land. That's why we see massive uprisings here and there all across the country around the issue of the land and what is happening on the question of the land. So the struggles that have been happening in silos in different communities, especially in Tolobeni, and the other struggles that are happening around the chrome mines in Begasfort in Limpopo. Those are the kind of struggles that we should that give us hope or that give us maybe an impetus, a revolutionary impetus, so that we can be able to respond to these challenges that we are facing post 1994, because there's been an emergence of a new middle class that has decided to side with global capitalism at the expense of the South African people, or at the expense of the people of this country. And how do we deal with that? We need to build revolutionary strong movements that can be able to respond to that. I think I will wrap up there.
Thank you so much, Phethani, for that. Sobantu?
Thank you, facilitator. I think mine is very short. Firstly is the one around research again. I think I agree with my colleague Sfiso that we hope that also the findings and recommendations as well will form part of the ongoing discussion, and then also will then position a youth perspective in this in the ongoing national discussion or discourse on land. But then lastly, I think also when we talk in the context of agriculture and mining, in the context of climate crisis as well, I think we should also be aware that the experts are also now indicating that unless the issues of climate change and the policies on land reform are considered simultaneously, the outcome will also be strongly negative of both sides, including food security as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sobantu. I'm not sure if Thembeni is still here. Thembeni? Okay, so since Thembeni is not here, I think it's sufficient to then wrap up the conversation. And just to thank everyone for coming, thank the panelists for the brilliant presentations, coming from different perspectives, which is very important to the conversation. But also to note that the research report will be again on Rethink Africa's social media, Twitter and Facebook. The report will be there, and it's also currently on the Zoom on our group chat. Please share the report widely, because I think this is a very important report to engage as young people. I think even moving forward, these conversations, I hope that they actually trickle down to the communities and do not just only end here, but we also take whatever that we speak about in these platforms to our communities, to our rural areas and the townships, and further engage on what the land question means for us as a people who are landless and have been dispossessed, and also take into account the manifestation of landlessness in the ways in which we engage even one another, and just in our society as Black people as well. Thank you so much to everybody who has participated, and thank you to Rethink Africa for this platform. Thank you, Phethani, Sobantu, Sfiso, Pinky, Thembeni, it was a beautiful conversation, and I hope that we can continue to have this conversation. And thank you to everyone for engaging us and giving us their time. And yeah, Bumi, do you have anything to add on that?
I think on behalf of Rethink Africa, I would really like to thank everybody. I mean, thank you for bearing with us. Facebook showed us flames, but we'll sort it out for our next dialogue. We'll keep you posted on further events. Please like us on Facebook and on Twitter. Please also follow us so we can keep you updated on upcoming events. Okay, and then the link for the so we've recorded this, and then we'll share the link of the recording as well on our websites and Facebook, Twitter, and then please share the report with your friends and institutions. Also, please give us feedback so that we know further, and then if there's a need for a policy brief, maybe tell us, give us feedback, guys. We'd really like your intake as well. Thank you so much, guys. Ngiyabonga kakhulu for isikhathi senu. Santhanda nonke emakhaya. Thank you once again. We think Africa and Funzani, thank you everybody. Nyansana, guys, thank you for participating. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Good evening and good night.
Thank you for me. Thank you.